Before I get going, who knows what non-dilutive funding is? It's good. Who does not know the term non-dilutive funding? Okay, good. So what non-dilutive funding is when you're starting a business, you're raising money. There's dilutive funding, which comes from investors who invest in your company, and they take some equity. They take some shares in exchange for capital. Non-dilutive funding are various forms of grants, tax credits, and other forms of financing that you get where you don't have to give up any control of your company. So if you want to get $1 million and don't want to give up any of your company, there's a lot of good stuff that we're going to go over here for you to get that. Before I jump into that also, I want to say that this is most of them. This is most of the big ones. This is not all of them. There are tons and tons of provincial and municipal programs that exist that are not covering it. This is just how to get your business off the ground and scale it without giving up any equity. Let's get into it. So we're going to go over the types of non-dilutive funding, the mandates of all of these programs, when to access these programs, the difference between preemptive and retroactive funding. We're going to go through how all of this works with SR&ED, because SR&ED is a retroactive program, how funding programs stack, and then normally I would say we'll finish off with a case study, but I think there's one too many people here to be able to do that today. You know who you are, that one person. So, types of non-dilutive funding. They go from early stage all the way to late stage. There's things like Futurepreneur, which is early stage. It's $45K as a loan. There's IRAP, which is early to mid, sometimes even late, from $50K to $250K in the form of a grant. There's the Canadian Media Fund, which is a loan with an asterisk next to it because sometimes it's a loan and sometimes it's equity in a specific project. This varies on a case by case. Interactive digital media tax credits, which is 17% of all your interactive digital media. We'll go into what all of these are in more granular detail in a few slides. This is a retroactive tax credit. SR&ED, which is a retroactive tax credit on money you've spent in your R&D. My tax, which is 50% of human capital. So if you are looking to hire a student or be part of a co-op program or bring in somebody to help with your R&D, they will help with that. There's BCIP, which is a contract from the federal government that will take your pre-commercialized product and sell it to the government. So sell it to one branch of the government, and they'll give you anywhere from $250K to $1 million if you're military, selling to Canadian military. There's Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which their minimum investment criteria is $250K. Up to $2 million is if you're building green tech, eco tech, some sort of hardware, really advanced technology. And then there's bridge financing, which will bridge your company from in between funding rounds and do other things. This is more dealt with by banks and things like that. So we're going to go through the mandates. We're going to jump through all of the programs we've just mentioned, and we're going to get into a little bit more detail without going too far into it. So Futurepreneur. This is a great program if you are just starting out and you're at stage one. It's for startup stage companies. It's a personal loan with a guarantee. It's $45K if you're going to be a full-time entrepreneur. It works in conjunction with the BDC. So Futurepreneur has a certain budget, and then the Business Development Bank of Canada comes in and they fund the rest of it. The requirements is $50 application fee. You have to have a business plan, and if you're building technology, some sort of prototype. We're not talking the end product. I mean, if you're building some sort of, I don't know, AI machine learning thing that will buy all your kids' toys, then it has to buy one toy. I don't know. There's no real specific criteria, but you have to have something to show them. The mandate is it's to fund early stage startup companies and just give you that loan to get you off the ground and get you going, so you can either finish a prototype, get your first customers, generate some sort of revenue. It requires a personal guarantee, and for the first year, there's no interest. So after that, you have to start paying it back. There's the Canadian Media Fund. This is for it's for pre-production. The Canadian Media Fund is built out of the Canadian Media Fund, so it's structured in a way for film projects, but they've taken the same approach and then they've turned it into something that applies for things like video games and other projects, which would generally be structured in the same stages. Not so much startup focused, but a lot of startup and tech companies have applied. So there's three funding stages. There's the idea stage, where very similar, you have some sort of prototype. Production, which is where you're building out and completing your actual product. And then there's marketing and distribution, so you have to have a product that is ready to be distributed. Every stage requires different amounts of content for each portion. So you'll have to talk about marketing in pre-production, just because they want to see how you're going to market and make sure that you have an idea of who your product is for, who's going to use it, who's going to pay for it. They'll contribute 75% of the cost of each product, up to $1 million. So if you're applying for $1 million, you're really saying my total project is $1,250,000. That's how much they will actually contribute up to the full amount of your project. It's a repayable loan, or sometimes it is an equity investment with 100% interest into a new project. You can always buy the CMF out. The purpose is that they don't want control of your company. They just want to make sure you're successful and that their program is sustainable and they get paid back for the money they've invested. You need a really good business plan and a financing plan that accounts for 25% of your costs to get this, and a market channel partner. So a market channel partner could be if you are building a VR, a virtual reality product, and you're saying, we're going to take this kids show and we're going to take, I don't know, Sesame Street, and we're going to apply Sesame Street in VR. Then they're going to say, okay, well, is Sesame Street going to leverage this? Are they going to use your IP? Are they going to help market it? How are you going to get this out into the world? Who are your partners to make this happen? That's really what they want to see, is that somebody else has validated your idea in the business world. You have to have a market channel partner. The mandates are building interactive digital media content. This applies to gaming, VR, and from my experience and what I've seen, some data visualization. So things that you would not consider traditional media, but they have been funded. One company that comes to mind, they built data visualization for the legal system, and they got $900,000. So I was impressed by that, and maybe it's an outlier, maybe the program is changing. I do not have an answer for you on that, but it's pretty cool. Contingencies are paid back within 7 years and generally paid back with 100% interest. Like I said, everything is variable. It's all a contract they give you, and it's up for you to negotiate and change the terms. These are just the standards. So IRAP, Industrial Research Assistance Program. It's innovative funding for early stage companies. The project is it's project based, so you can come in when you have $5 million in revenue, and you could say we're doing this new project, and they'll still give you funding to make that happen. The first contribution of funding is usually $50K. That's what I've seen if you're getting into the beginning of their calendar year. They'll fund up to 75% of your R&D costs. So saying, hey, I need $100,000 for this, or let's say I need $100,000 for this project. I'm going to pay people, $10,000 a month, they'll cover 75% of that. So if you're paying somebody 10 grand a month, they'll pay 75% of that, and then they'll reimburse you after you've paid the person. Usually takes about 30 days to get your money back from them. You have to have a vetted IRAP application, a functional early stage prototype of the technology. Like I said, it's not market ready. It's just saying, this is what I've built, and I'm capable of actually making this happen. They just want to see proof that you have a really good idea of what you're going to do. The project must address technological innovation. So this is not a business grant. This is not to say, here's my idea of a business plan. It's to say, here's my plan to build solid technology and with some sort of idea of commercialization in mind. The mandate is to fund early stage Canadian tech companies and to push the bounds of innovation. We're really trying to find groundbreaking, different technology and things that could be applied outside of the, they're more outside of the box thinking. It's not about building a website. It's more about building something groundbreaking and earth-shattering. The contingency is, you're paid back within 30 days after you run your payroll, after your employees are paid, and you have to submit monthly reports, which, from what I've seen from our clients, not everybody always does. Interactive digital media tax credit. So now we're going into the reimbursement side of things. So this is a retroactive program. So it's a refundable tax credit. It's filed at the end of your year in addition to your SR&ED claim. We'll go into what SR&ED is in a bit. And it's the provincial portion. So this applies if you if you're building video games, if you're building some sort of interactive digital media, a video game, virtual reality, something along those lines that people can interact with and can engage with. That's when you would generally apply for something like that. And this will cover different people's salaries, which would normally not be covered by the program. So this would cover a 3D modeler, or somebody who would be working, on the design portion of the game, which is not necessarily research and development, but it's essential to making the products actually happen. The requirements: you have to have a provincial application sent into the provincial government 3 months before your year end. You have to pay an application based on the amount you intend to claim. So usually it's a few $1,000s. The digital content creation it has to have audio, visual, and interactive components. So meaning it has to have 2 out of 3. So it has to have audio and visual, it has to have interactive, it has to have something that would deem it interactive digital media. And certain things like porn do not qualify. I've had that question many times before. I know. Some people are like, oh, damn it, Eric, why? So it's a provincial tax credit in lieu of SR&ED. And the contingencies is the first time you do submit, you are audited by the government. They will come in and make sure you're actually building what you say you're building and not just building VR porn. So, my tax. My tax is for postgraduate students and professors to work on a specific company project. So if you have a company that is building innovative technology and you are looking to, you're hitting a roadblock, you have X amount of money left in the bank, my tax will come and give you 50% of your budget to hire graduate students and a professor to work on your project. So you may find somebody out of SFU or out of UBC who is working on something in your field, and maybe you could, or that applies to your business, and maybe you could pay them to keep researching it and to bring the technology in-house. They will cover 50% of your project on a project-by-project basis. You have to have a lab and working space. You have to have a specific project plan. And the purpose of this whole program is to facilitate graduates into working industry. So it's saying, hey, I've got my master's degree in X. I need a job here, and I'm willing to do this research. The government will comp in hopes that you will hire them after. Built-in Canada innovation programs. This has been around for a little while. The purpose of this is it's to bring early-stage companies to apply for funding to in terms of a contract to the federal government. So it's saying the federal government has sort of realized that we as a country have done a lot of deals with outside companies and not necessarily looked in our own backyard. So if you could figure out a way to solve the government's internal problems for any of the major branches of government, they will pay you very well for it. The contracts usually go from $250K to $1 million based on the government agency you're applying to. So RCMP is one branch, military is another branch, Health Canada is another branch. If you think your software or your product or your hardware has a specific application, you need to define this in your application and explain why you're solving their problem and what their pain point is. The government's not going to tell you what their pain points are. You kind of have to figure this out. Requirements are a business plan, prototype of your technology from a controlled environment. When I say controlled environment, if you're saying you're building wind turbines that are to be put on top of rooftops of skyscrapers, you have to prove that the wind turbine on the top of a skyscraper will not go flying off. I have a really funny story with this, and I'll happily share it after, but it's a really good story. You have to have 0 sales prior to the submission, meaning you have a product, you have a prototype, it's ready, it may be ready to be commercialized, but the Canadian government wants to be in a position where they're your first customer. Now, this is not to say once you submit your application, you can go and sell it. So if you finish your application, you send it in, and now you want to start commercializing and selling your product, by all means, get this in first. The mandate is to aid in the commercialization and distribution of Canadian technology. So it's just for Canada, just for companies to say we're in business with the Canadian government. The contracts are generally renewable, and that's really it. The contingencies of the products must be delivered on the specifications of the service of work, meaning you say this is what I'm going to get done, and that's what you deliver. There's not much area for wiggle room, and it does come down to who you're working with. I mean, if you're working with, let's say, somebody from Health Canada, and they're really flexible and realize that their needs have changed over time, they may be more flexible to work with you. That's more on a personal level. It must suit a specific need for a government organization, and you're paid on the terms of the contract. So this is not money up front, this is not money at the end, you're paid on, and this is not money based on the variabilities, but whatever you sign in the beginning of the contract is really what you have to deliver, which is why you have to stick to the service of work. So then there's Sustainable Economic Development to Canada, SDTC. Oops, Sustainable Development Technology Canada. That's a typo. It's non-dilutive financing. Their minimum investment criteria is $250K. They have a serious, crazy, heavy due diligence process. It's a very lengthy and long application to be able to get this entered into this program. Their minimum investment, like I said, is $250K. It goes up to, there's really no cap. It depends on how much money you need for your project. They're looking for big environmental and sustainable wins. So green tech, biotech, not necessarily so much health tech, agri-tech, things that are innovative and can either help with food or can help with water purification or things along that line. So, yeah, when you apply for this, they're looking for very big wins. The way they always say it is they're first to commit, last to invest. So if you go through their due diligence process and they're very interested in what you're doing, and the due diligence process, just so you all know, takes about 9 months, then they will say, yep, we're in, we'll give you $400,000, go raise the rest of your round, you have us committed. The best part about this is they don't take any equity in your company. This is a straight grant, And if you take this, they don't sit on your cap table. But also, if you actually get the due diligence, what's really interesting about this one specifically is the due diligence is so I want to say over the top. It's so excessive that most other venture capital VCs will just look at this and they'll say, "Wow, you got that? Okay, now I'm really interested," because it's a very good litmus test. The requirements are innovation, so patents and a marketing plan, business management and financial plan, and environmental benefits. You have to be able to quantify your environmental benefits. It cannot be just a pretty fluffy story. You have to have a prototype of the technology that is ready to scale up. Zero commercial sales of technology prior to the application. So this is similar to the BCIP in that regard. And you have to be developing innovative technology. The contingencies are, like I said, there's heavy due diligence process of your invited detailed proposal, and the first to commit to funding, last to invest. So they do have a lot of industry partners that they will bring to the table and can help you sell this to if you go through the due diligence. Bridge financing. This is a loan. It's a loan or some sort of financing agreement. It's always done with a private institution or a bank. So it's done by banks. Exactly, it's right there. It will require something to loan against in the event that you default. The amount of the loan and then the repayment terms vary. So I've seen a lot of things like revenue financing. So if you're doing $100,000 a month and you need somebody to finance your revenue just so you can scale, there are people out there who will do that. People will also fund, if let's say you have $1 million contract and you need to get X amount of funding or get X amount of hardware and you don't want to necessarily go raise around, there are people who will loan you the money against your contract based on the fact that someone's giving you the contract, you could get deliverables, and then they'll get paid a percentage after that. You could finance revenue, inventory, really anything that you can use as collateral. We do sometimes with our clients is we'll see people will come in and they'll say, there's a company, they've spent $3 million on R&D. They have a SR&ED claim coming back, and we haven't gone into SR&ED yet, but I'll get into that in a second. It's a tax credit, and they'll say, I will finance this tax credit, or I will finance something. Can you tell me what it's actually worth? So these mandates, they're short-term, medium-term, long-term financing. These are guys who are out to make a buck. They're not necessarily your best friends, but they always want to work with you and make sure you're working on a proper level. They do want to get repaid, and they may want a personal guarantee, and the interest rates are generally pretty high. So when do we access these programs? I love this slide. So when you access these programs, the Futurepreneur is very early. So you basically have to have a business plan or a functional prototype. IRAP, CMF, MyTax, SDTC, these are all accessed at the prototype phase. So you have to have something that's functional. When exactly in the prototype phase is not the same for every project. Like I said, SETC, you probably have to have something that's got patents and you've dumped significant funding and time into. Whereas IRAP it could be a sensor that you've proven works on a very basic level. Production is very much the same thing. BCIP is once you're slightly beyond prototype, ready to go to production. Bridge financing, they usually want to see some sort of traction. And commercialization CMF is all about when you're commercializing your product, so they have a marketing stream. MyTax will fund you through commercialization as long as you still need that co-op student, you're still developing the product or project, and bridge financing will go all through. Then there's IDMTCs, Interactive Digital Media Tax Credits, and there's SR&ED, which we'll get to right now, after this slide. So these programs apply to different things, so we're going to go through a few examples. We're going to start on the right. So sometimes people say, I have this e-commerce site. What should I do? How do I get money? What programs are available? Every entrepreneur is different. Everyone has a different specialization. I say Futurepreneur is your best bet. It's a loan. There's no groundbreaking technology. There's no interactive media. There's no R&D. You just need some money to get you off the ground. That's where you go. Once you're up and running, bridge financing. Once you're financing inventory or doing something else, that's the other way. So a consumer app, Futurepreneur, IRAP, Interactive Digital Media Tax Credits. This is the only one that's really pending on what you're doing. Is there audio, visual, is it interactive, or is this just a banking app? Is it some sort of SaaS product that you're building? That's a little more case by case. And yeah, you could see agriculture, what's available, medical devices, or VR. Everything applies to different streams. Everything is access to different types of funding. So preemptive versus retroactive funding. So preemptive is pretty much everything here that most of the ones that we've gone over. The difference between them is preemptive is it requires a grant, or it requires an application, it requires upfront time that you as the entrepreneur are investing. It requires a business plan. It requires a lot of business intelligence. Sometimes, if you're a technical person, you'll require some technical documentation and explanation as well. If approved, it'll be proposed in a grant or an invoice or a grant of that amount. So saying, this is what I'm proposing. This is what I'm going to build. This is what I'm going to do. This is exactly what we're going to expect. The difference between that and retroactive financing is the retroactive, such as SR&ED tax credits and interactive digital media tax credits, requires you to go back and say, here's the proof of what I've done, right? So it's not saying this is what I'm going to do. You're not selling a story. You're not selling a dream. You're saying, no. I did all of these things. Here's everything else I've done. Give me my money back. This requires documentation, proof of work, requires procedural documentation, not just a written explanation of what you've done, but saying, this is the process that I went to in order to achieve this outcome. It requires engineering and scientific intelligence that you have to file in addition to this, and it's contingent on technical auditor from the CRA, proof of addressing the program guidelines defined by the CRA. So unlike all of these other programs which we've mentioned, interactive digital media tax credits and SR&ED, which are the retroactive programs, these are only really, these are looked at by the CRA. They don't have their own mandate to fund people. They address a very broad range. They address almost everything here, except for, well, Futurepreneur you would fall into that also. So yeah, they address everything. So they have a wider aperture, but that's why they're much more restrictive and diligent on the process of who they're going to give funding to, right? Because they're not just dealing with interactive digital media. They're not just dealing with games or agritech. There's so many things that they go into. So a grant versus non-funding on SR&ED. So SR&ED, like I said, this is a retroactive program. The grants are non-repayable funding. They're non-repayable funding, repayable, and or secured examples. So this is loan equity. So bridge financing that we've talked about, equity financing. Some of these programs would fall into equity financing, mainly the Canadian Media Fund. Funding can be leveraged by SR&ED. So if let's say you're applying for the Canadian Media Fund and you need that extra 25%, you could actually say, hey, I'm spending X amount on software engineers or X amount on developers to make my technology. You could come to somebody like us and you would say, how much do you think my SR&ED is going to be? Or, we would be doing your SR&ED and you would say, yeah, this is how much I expect to get back for my R&D, which is about 64%. I just realized I did not mention that. So yeah, if you're looking at SR&ED is 64% of your R&D expenditures. So what is the qualifying criteria of SR&ED, which is getting a cash back of up to 64% of what you're paying your engineers? It's technological uncertainty, addressing technological challenges, technical content or iteration. So to get the money back from these retroactive programs is very much saying, this is what I did. This is the challenge that I have. This is how I'm intending to overcome it, and documenting everything that happens on the way to getting there. This doesn't say everything has to be successful. In fact, it's technology and you're trying things that have never been done before, or in your knowledge have not been done before, or with the knowledge that you have has not been done before. And you're going to fail a lot and you're going to get a lot of things wrong. But the CRA and the government wants to see that you've learned something and you've advanced your scientific knowledge and you've tried and failed. Just document it. That's really what they want to see. So SR&ED. SR&ED is the big retroactive program, and as long as you're building innovative technology, you are pretty much eligible to it. It is a refundable tax credit, so you actually get cash back, a check back from the federal and provincial government, up to 64% salaries, 32% contractors, and 42% materials. So if you are building some sort of hardware, I know some of you in this room are, and you're building some sort of hardware, they will want to see, what have you gone? How have you applied the technological innovation? If you're buying and destroying OLED TVs and smashing them into pieces to advance your technology, they just want to see that you're doing it and that you're not just buying TVs and reselling them and asking for 42% back. This is also capped at $500,000 of net revenue. So when your company is generating more than $500,000 of profit, this turns into a different type of tax credit, which is a tax credit against what you would pay in federal and provincial taxes. So now instead of getting cash back, you're just getting a 36% credit on salaries, 18% on contractors, 24% on materials. This is also the same program that would apply to a Canadian-controlled private non-Canadian controlled private corporation. The difference is, and the reason why this program is this way is, The first part of SR&ED is to help small businesses grow and develop innovative technology, and it's really to provide jobs to Canadian taxpayers, so Canadian-controlled private corporations who are paying salaried employees. It's really to promote jobs and promote smart work. This is if American companies or foreign companies wanted to come up here, or for companies that are making enough revenue, and it's not such a big concern about theirs. They're more focused on growing their business than they are about receiving funding from the government. So how do these programs stack? Well, for interactive digital media tax credits and SR&ED, all the retroactive ones, they work with pretty much everything. For Futurepreneur, it's 100% of the eligible work. For IRAP, it's the company paid a portion. So like I said, with IRAP, you pay 75%. That other 25% is SR&ED eligible. Plus, there's something called a proxy, but that's a whole other story. You can ping me after and we'll talk about it. All of these are, the Canadian government just wants to give you things back. And like I said, because you're applying for these up front, they're willing to give you some money back at the end just for getting through us doing the due diligence, and if you're building cool technology. So, case study. We're going to skip this completely because of time constraints, and yeah. Would also go as part of the case study. But that's pretty much it. My name is Erik Ashdown. Thank you, everybody, for having me. If you want to grab me and ask me any questions, I will be outside for about 10, 15 minutes. I will leave some cards here. Feel free to email, contact, call, Twitter, carrier pigeon, whatever. Thanks, guys.